And the good times continue on Smoking with the Blend. And I am with some cigar royalty here. 5 generations. The Cuevas boys are here. Luis and Alec. It is an absolute honor to have you guys on the show. Luis and his son, Alec. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us.
Oh my goodness, thanks for having us, considering us. I really, really appreciate it.
Truthfully.
Yeah. So we're at City Cigar Lounge in downtown Miami, one of my favorite spots. Shout out to Tico Gutierrez and all the people here at City Cigar Lounge for opening up the doors and letting us hang out. All right, so let's talk about this. This is an amazing story. This is, if there is more of an American dream quintessential story, 5 generations from Spain to Cuba to the DR to Miami, and it's landed on you to keep the ball going here, my friend.
Well, you know what? It is really the American dream, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, you know, now with Alec as part of it, it kind of brings everything full circle, right? So I'm first generation Cuban American, and obviously my dad is as well, and my uncle when they started the factory, and to have them land in the industry that my great-grandfather had begun back in Cuba as a Spanish immigrant is phenomenal. It's super cool. And then to have Alec actually like it and want to be a part of it is even more phenomenal. So I'm very blessed to work with my father and my son in an industry that I love and that so many people love.
All right, so before we get to the history of the Cuevas Cigar Company, Director of Operations, Alec, okay, 22 years old, 22. How did a guy who wanted to be a zookeeper get into the cigar business? You wanted to be Ron McGill? You wanted to be the next? How do you go from zookeeper to cigars?
First off, I'm surprised that I'm the only you know that.
We've got people. We've got crack research here at My Blend.
People have questions. Definitely. So initially, it was more so growing up every summer going to the factory and visiting my grandfather. A lot of that aspect, and mind you, I am relatively young, but when I was much younger, was going up, seeing my grandfather at the factory. You know, he'd be working at our old factory, mind you, and give me a nice little hug. It'd be 5, maybe 6 in the morning or so, and he'd send me right downstairs to essentially start packing up cigars with the next ladies that we had working there. So I was kind of always surrounded by this aroma of cigars. And with that knowledge, I didn't really know where to go with it. As you just said, I wanted to be a zookeeper growing up. I had a huge infatuation with animals. That vision that I had quickly just kind of went on by the wayside by the age of like 10 or 12 or so. And that's when I started getting more into cigars and what they were about. So I had asked my dad a lot of questions about it and so forth. Fast forward, I ended up nabbing this gig at Neptune Cigars. And I worked with them on the retail aspect of things for close to about a year. That's when a lot of the knowledge in regards towards smoking cigars, blends, strengths, that sort of thing really got me into the gist as to what cigars truthfully are. And then my father offered me the position of Director of Operations, and I've been with my dad full time ever since.
Now, as a dad, it's got to be number one, being Latino. You have a son. That's amazing. You're right there. You're winning. You're house money right there. You're a house money. But then to actually say, Dad, I want to do what you do. So tell me what that was for you.
As I said earlier, it's a blessing. I mean, our daughter, for example, he and his sister are 1 year and 18 days apart, almost Irish twins, and she has zero interest in the cigar industry.
Is she a zookeeper?
She's just finishing. She's about to go to law school, but she is so adamant about the smell and the smoke. She hates it.
Oh no!
So we're very much a family operation. My wife's a teacher, so in the summers she's off, and we will go to the trade convention shows. And it's a family endeavor, right? It's all built around family. Everything from our banding or the names for cigars, all of it, right? It's all family. And I remember thinking in 2019, bring her over. She could at least make Cuban coffee and coladita when people walk by, that kind of thing. And then my wife has this epiphany and says, "Can you imagine this beautiful young lady going like this at a booth?" I mean, who's going to go near that booth, right?
Yes.
Not going to work. So, yeah, the fact that he got into it and really, really liked it, and then smoked so many different brands when he was working at the other shop, it's been a blessing. And then you couple that with the fact that my dad's running the factory, and it's really, really a neat thing. And I don't take it for granted. I think we're very blessed and very fortunate.
All right, so let's talk about let's peel it back. We mentioned it, 5 generations of Cuevas in the cigar business here. So you guys in terms of your own brand, which we're smoking right now, it's baby. It's what, 4 years old?
Yeah, just learning how to walk.
But the company's 100 years old. So tell us about the story of Cuevas.
Well, my great grandfather, when he immigrated from Spain in the 19th century, he had been essentially a farmer in Santander, in the northern part of Spain. He comes down to Cuba, Pinar del Rio, which is the westernmost part of the island. And there he becomes a tobacco farmer by default, because tobacco was grown in that part of Cuba. My grandfather was able to do very well with it. And then 1959 happened and everything's gone. By 1968, my father had gone to Spain and he was able to us over in 1970. So I was born over there in 66. So I was 4, we wound up in Spain. We were in Spain for almost a year at that point. And then we want to come into the States.
Right.
In the States, my dad reinvents himself, opens up a different business, and does well. Again, the American dream lived, right?
Absolutely.
And experienced. And one of his brothers, 10 brothers and sisters, one of them decides Sergio. So my uncle Sergio, who just passed away last week, unfortunately, he had long drawn out illness, and he and my dad had gone separate ways sometime back in 2007 to be exact. And in any event, going back to the way they did it, in the 80s, my uncle and my dad decided to open up a factory in the Dominican Republic. Now, my dad had his business here, but my uncle then ran the factory full-time over there. I would spend my summers, and my dad was essentially financing things and go over there as often as he could. When the 90s hit, my father and his business partner dissolved the company. Business partner retired, and my dad retired, winds up going to the Dominican Republic, and that's when the factory was really in full-on production. At that point, Carlos Tarano, who was a dear friend of the family, the very first Taranos were made there. And if you guys have been smoking for a while, you remember these Carlos Tarano boxes. You'd be Carlos the First, Roman numerals, Carlos the Second, Carlos the Third, Carlos IV the Fourth, etc. Right? And with him, a lot of brands were then brought into the factory. So through that factory of Cuevas y Hermanos, which was the name of the original factory, Dunhill went there, Peterson of Dublin, Villiger, first Gurkhas, Yumuri, Vuelta Abajo, obviously Toraño, La Perla Habana. I mean, a lot of brands went through that, and it was a really cool time, especially when the boom hit. And so it was a good ride. And in the 80s, when I was, in 83, I was 16, I would spend my summers with my uncle at the factory and kind of becoming immersed in tobacco. And I did different things before I got into this with my father, but again, I was kind of surrounded by it for a very long time. And it was just a phenomenal time. And then once my dad and my uncle went their separate ways, my father was thinking about coming back to the States and just hanging it up. I remember I took a flight in 2009. It was an evening, and I came back the next day, and I said, I think we should keep this going. I'm an only child. It's a shame. Great-grandpop did this. Grandpop did this. You're doing this. Let's give it a go. So we did. And the factory still continues to manufacture for other brands, but I was always afraid of launching our own brand because I knew how difficult it was. The number of people that go through a factory with their dream of having a brand and falter within the first year is astronomical.
And you guys saw it firsthand.
Yes. Yes, because you can have the world's greatest cigar. So I've got to convince Tico, who doesn't know me from Adam, well, he does, obviously, but let's assume he doesn't,
Sure.
to put in his space, and it's only limited, a brand that he's never heard of. And that's a real difficult challenge. And so I wasn't sure how to do it. But the FDA, I'm going to get a little geeky here, the FDA had mandated, and they haven't followed up on it, thank God, had mandated that if you didn't have a brand out by a certain month in 2016, you could not then launch a brand, period.
So it
was do or die.
They gave history a nudge.
That's it. It was do or die. And so we did. In 2016, we brought in the first Casa Cuevas, but the official launch was April of 2017. So we fulfilled what was demanded of the FDA with some local shops that knew us and whatnot. So I did that part of it, but we were really ready to launch full on in April of 2017. And we did. And here we are, 4 years later, 4 and a few months, right?
Yeah.
What are we in August? So 4 years, 3 months.
Yeah.